When it's right, and when it's wrong, it's very confidently wrong.
Yes.
It never says, I'm not sure,
Which is something for
confident.
students to be aware of, because you can confidently tell a lie. Annyeonghaseyo, this is Mark Peters with the Frog outside the Well Research Center, and today I have a new friend to introduce you. This is Robert Coles. How are you?
Doing great. Happy to be here.
You were a student of mine.
I was.
100 years ago.
Yeah, well, not quite.
Not that
but,
long. 5-6 years ago?
Graduated 2019.
Oh, okay, so about 5-6 years ago.
Yep.
And his wife did a master's degree, and I sat on her committee.
Yep.
And she's a school counselor now.
School psychologist.
School,
Yep.
school psychologist. And 2 babies at home.
2 babies. Yep. A 3-year-old and a 3-month-old.
Oh, really? Oh, for fun. That's so much fun. The reason we're here is Robert has suggested an interesting idea, and that is to critique ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, on Korean studies. And I thought that was a great idea. Thanks for mentioning that.
Wanted to see if it was going to put you out of a job, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's putting a lot of people out of jobs.
Yep. I tried to ask it, so started off just asking what is Dokdo, right? And it said, explain what the island is, explain kind of the conflict between Korea and Japan. I asked it, what are the Korean claims to the island historically? What are the Japanese claims to the island historically? And then ended up asking it, who do you think has that right? And it gave pretty much the same as the first answer, asking just what is it?
Neutral.
Really neutral. It's hard to say, who deserves it. As it's a large language model trained on English content. I asked it in Korean as well. 독도는 뭐예요? When it's trained on the Korean stuff, it did lean more towards
Really?
독도. I also asked it, what does 독도는 우리 땅 mean? And it said, it's an expression of Korea's claim. So I think in general, both in the Korean and the English, it did a really good job of sourcing kind of the knowledge that's out there, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'd say it gets an A.
I asked about the Japanese-Korean relationship and historically the things that have gone on. And it came out quite critical of Japan. And when you look at it that way, I mean, how can you say the Hideyoshi invasion was okay? There's nothing good about that, nothing positive on the Japanese side.
Right.
And the occupation of Japan. So it came out quite critical of Japan. And in that regard, truthful, honest, I'd give it an A.
Yeah. I asked it who the last queen of Korea was. And it said the last queen was Queen Sunjong, the wife of King Kojong. Which is obviously just wrong. It's, obviously trying to say
that's the son that's talking about the son of King Kojong.
I think it was trying to say Sunjong, and it had the spelling wrong. Obviously, it's his son. When I asked it who's the last empress, then it got it correct.
Myeongseong Wanghu, yeah. So, what, is that a C?
I'm going to give it an F for that, honestly. When it's right, and when it's wrong, it's very confidently wrong.
Yes.
It never says, I'm not sure,
Which is something for students to be aware of, because you can confidently tell a lie and think that you're telling a great story and you've got it wrong. So you've got to double check the facts to look at ChatGPT. Another one that I did was I asked about Chung Mong-ju's posterity. Because, one of my things is to argue that the transition from Koryo to Chosun was really smooth. Aside from the Samoon, only one of whom was killed, and the other 2 just took off and didn't want to support it. Everyone else jumped on board and supported the dynasty, including Chung Mong-ju's son and his grandson and his posterity. I did a video about this recently, about even his Weson, his grandson's by his daughter's side. And, I'm anti-Weson these days. I think that's a poor kinship structure to talk about the outside grandchildren, the outside grandfather. But I asked it about Chung Mong-ju's children, got it completely wrong. It tried to tell me that one of his children was Chung Do-jun, who was a contemporary of his, who supported the dynasty, and the heir was Chung Ya-gyong. Chung Ya-gyong was a Shidduch scholar in the 18th century, whose Chung character was not a Chungja, the Chung character for Chung Mong-ju, but Mo Chungja, the completely different Chung character. There are 2 Chung characters. One's less used than the other. It was the less used. And it tried to tell me that Chung Ya-gyong was a descendant of Chung Mong-ju. So, no help on that. Sorry, ChatGPT. F on that one.
Yeah, I tried to ask it about dynasties as well. Speaking of peaceful transitions of power, who had the longest dynasties.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, and it came out and it said that it was China and listed off a few of the dynasties and how long they were. Obviously, if I had just seen that and didn't know anything about Korea, right, I would have been like, okay, China's got the longest dynasties. Obviously, I know Korea has longer dynasties. So then asked it, what was the longest dynasty in South Korea or in Korea? And answered, gave the length, and you can just see that it's longer, right? So then I asked ChatGPT, I said, so doesn't that mean that Korea had the longest dynasties on Earth? He said, oh, you're right, yeah, it did. If I hadn't had any knowledge of Korea, I would have just taken its first answer, so I'm going to give it an F on that one as well.
Another F. Sorry, ChatGPT. I'm going to give it an A on something right here.
Okay.
And that is one of my frustrations with the internet world that we all live in is when you have a new word that you don't know. And I'm constantly running into new words on the comments of my YouTube channel and such. And I look up the word, I can find the Hangul equivalent quite easily. But I like the old-fashioned dictionary where you can get the Hanja.
Right.
Because the Hanja tells you the deeper meaning, the etymology of the word. So I had a word the other day, I asked ChatGPT what it was, and it gave me the full, not only the character, it gave me the character that I didn't know, and then it gave me the etymological background of it. So ChatGPT, there's an A for you on looking up words and giving the Chinese background on it.
Yeah, and on the topic of vocabulary, I did a similar thing with kind of some of those words that are a little harder to define for English speakers, or especially when you're first learning Korean, hard to understand. Things like jung, between two people, or
yeah, how to do on chung?
Jung. So at first I just said, what does jung mean? And it used the like jungcheck, jungchi jung, and explained that character, right? And so I could correct it and say, well, what if someone's talking about jung between two people? And it did a pretty good job. It says, yeah, if you're talking about people having jung, it's possible you're using the word to refer to romantic or emotional connection between them. So romantic, not always so much, but an emotional connection between them, I think it did a pretty good job. I'd give it, a B+.
B+
on jung.
For some reason, I was thinking of 386. Do you know about 386?
I don't.
That might be too early for you. Several years ago, really in the 90s, so that really is old for you, Koreans referred to themselves as a 386 generation.
Okay.
386 was the name of the dominant microchip that was used during that period. But anyway, 386 was the dominant microchip that everybody had to have in their computer back then. And the 386 was also a description of a certain generation in Korea.
Okay.
And what they defined it as, and this is what I was looking up because I couldn't quite remember it. 3 is people that are in their 30s.
Okay.
Who in the 1980s came of age and were the fighters for democracy that helped establish the post-87 true democracy in Korea. And 6 is they were born in the 60s.
Oh, okay.
So 386 defined that generation.
Yeah.
Well, these days, that generation who really came of age, went to college in the 80s and 90s, got jobs in the 2000s, they're now the managers of a lot of the business and government around.
Right.
And because they were a little bit left-wingish, right-wing people criticize them for actions they take in the government today. And people have said to me, the government is 386, So I couldn't remember what the 386 was exactly, so I asked, completely missed it. I didn't know it. They said, I can't know all slang.
Yeah.
So I made a mistake, I guess. I told them what I knew. The 30s, 80s come of age, and born in the 60s. And it came back and said, that is correct. And then filled it in and told me the details of it. So it got it right after it missed it. So B grade on that one.
Little direction to get it there. Gotcha.
Yeah. And that's the way it works. A lot of times if you direct it where it needs to go from something you know and you need to know more, it can be very helpful in that way.
Definitely. I know Confucianism comes under a lot of criticism nowadays, right? And there's ChatGPT, there's also Google has their large language model that they just released. ChatGPT was, it just kind of generically described what Confucianism is. When I asked Google, however, their large language model, it came out and said...
Oh, you're into Google, the new one already. Is it better?
It's different. So it doesn't keep logs necessarily, so that's kind of hard to go back and look. I just got it this morning. So
really? Yeah. That's really new. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I haven't been able to explore it quite as much, but when I asked about, is Confucianism good, it definitely gave a more thorough answer, explaining, here are the benefits of Confucianism, a structured society, it's contributed to, peace in a lot of the areas that it's been implemented, and then was able to give a couple criticisms of, developing an overly patriarchal society at times. So I think Google did, I'll give Google probably an A on its answer there. And ChatGPT, I'll say a B plus as well. It did a good job describing what Confucianism is. Wasn't quite able to answer, is it good? Which, is a hard question.
It is a hard question. And he balks at subjective questions.
Right.
He.
Yeah.
As if it's a he. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, Confucianism is under a lot of attack these days. Let's wrap it up. The last question that I have, I asked it about Mark Peterson. And it completely missed it. And of course, there are 1,000 Mark Petersons. So you have to say Mark Peterson in Korean Studies or Mark Peterson at BYU. And then it did a so-so job. It told a little bit about my career and background and such. But then it had a book I've written, and then 3 books that I did not write. And I wrote back and said, no, that's not right. And it came back and it was insistent that I had written these books that I hadn't written. So that was a little funny. What did you find about Mark Peterson?
Kind of similar with your last question, it needs a little direction. So I just said, who is Mark Peterson? I said, well, I don't know. There's lots of Mark Petersons out there. So directing it and saying, what about the one that taught Korean at BYU? It gave a pretty good, background of who you are, when you taught at BYU. I don't think it had dates right. I think it struggles with dates. It also never had that you attended Harvard.
Oh, really?
It gave a very long list of other universities.
Probably incorrect.
Yeah, Yonsei, Washington University, I think it said, Seogang 대학교.
I've given lectures at all those places.
Yeah, so it listed, I think that's probably what mixed it up. So when I directed it towards BYU, it was able to give like a general background, but messed up on dates, messed up on universities taught at versus learned at. So maybe a C minus on that one.
Well, that's our appraisal of ChatGPT. A few A's, a couple of B's and C's, a bunch of F's. So be careful if you're using ChatGPT. That's our take on ChatGPT and Korean studies. Robert, thanks for coming in.
No, thank you for having me. It's been a great time. I really appreciate it.
Great, and let's do another one sometime.
Definitely.
On something fun that we both are interested in.
Yeah, I'd love to.
And we'll see you next time on The Frog Outside the Well. Bye.
Bye.